Jack Mercer checked his oxygen meters for the third time that day. All normal. He marked another day on his wall calendar with a small red X, day 184 since the world ended. 6 months since the sky turned dark with alien ships. His underground bunker hummed with the steady sound of air filters and generators. Jack had built this place over 5 years, piece by piece. Friends had laughed at him, called him crazy. They weren't laughing now. They weren't doing anything now. Jack ran his hand through his dirty blonde hair, now longer than he'd ever worn it. In the small mirror by his sink, he barely recognized himself. His face was thinner, his blue eyes looked darker, and his beard had grown thick and untamed. He looked like a wild man, not the clean-cut military engineer he once was. The bunker was 15 feet below ground in rural Montana, hidden beneath what used to be his workshop. Above was nothing but ashes now. The aliens, the Vraxians, had been thorough in their destruction. Jack moved to his radio setup and adjusted the dials, listening to the static. Sometimes he caught snippets of the alien language, harsh and clicking. He had started to recognize patterns in their communications. It wasn't much, but it gave him purpose. His living space was small but efficient. A main room with his communications equipment, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom with carefully rationed water, and a bedroom just big enough for a cot. The walls were lined with shelves of canned food, medical supplies, and books. So many books. They kept him sane in the endless quiet. Jack opened a can of beans for dinner. He had enough food for another year if he was careful. Water was recycled through a system he designed himself. He could survive here, alone, waiting for what? He didn't know anymore. Before eating, he checked his perimeter sensors. 6 tiny cameras showed different angles of the land above. Nothing moved except the wind blowing through dead trees. The Vraxians had sprayed something from their ships that killed most plants. Only their own alien vegetation seemed to grow now, purple and blue plants that spread like cancer across the landscape. Jack sat at his small metal table and ate slowly. He thought about the last time he saw another human. It was Diane, his neighbor from 5 miles down the road. She had come running to his house when the first ships appeared. They had watched together as strange crafts descended, beautiful and terrible. Diane had left to check on her parents in town. "I'll be back in a few hours," she had said. She never returned. After dinner, Jack did 50 push-ups and 50 sit-ups. He needed to stay strong. For what, he didn't know, but weakness meant death. That's what the military had taught him. At night, he allowed himself one luxury, a small glass of whiskey from his dwindling supply. He sipped it slowly while reading a dog-eared copy of Robinson Crusoe. The irony wasn't lost on him. The bunker had no windows, but Jack kept to a strict schedule. Lights out at 10 p.m. He lay on his cot and stared at the concrete ceiling. Sometimes he wondered if he was the last human alive. The Vraxians had been efficient in their extermination, using weapons beyond human understanding. Cities were the first to fall. Remote areas lasted longer, but the aliens had hunted survivors with floating drones that could detect body heat and movement. Jack's bunker was special, lined with materials that blocked thermal scanning. His air vents were disguised and filtered to remove traces of human presence. He had planned for nuclear war, climate collapse, or civil breakdown. Instead, he got aliens. Funny how life worked out. As he drifted to sleep, Jack wondered, as he did every night, if staying alive was worth it. Was surviving enough? Or was he just postponing the inevitable? In his dreams, he saw the stars. But they weren't the stars he knew. They were colder, more distant, and somehow wrong. Tomorrow would be day 185. Just another day of waiting. Another day alone. A storm rolled in on day 187. Jack watched through his periscope camera as lightning cut across the dark sky. Rain pounded the earth above his bunker. The alien plants bent and swayed in the heavy wind, their strange blue leaves flashing with each lightning strike. Jack enjoyed storms. They masked any small noises his bunker might make and scrambled the sensors on Vraxian drones. He allowed himself an extra ration of power during storms, turning on a small heater to fight the dampness that crept through the concrete walls. He was heating water for coffee when the first alarm sounded. A soft beep from his security system. Something had triggered the motion sensor near his hidden entrance. Jack froze, coffee forgotten. In 6 months, nothing larger than a raccoon had come near his bunker. He moved quickly to his monitors. The rain made visibility poor, but he adjusted the night vision settings. There, a shape moved across the screen. Too big for an animal, too small for a Vraxian. Jack's heart pounded. He zoomed in the camera. The figure stumbled, fell to its knees, then collapsed near the hidden hatch. It looked almost human, but not quite. In the green glow of night vision, he could see the figure was female, in shape. She wore torn clothing that looked like some kind of uniform. But her ears, they came to slight points, and her skin seemed to have an odd tint to it, even in the distorted camera view. Not human, Jack whispered to himself, but not Vraxian either. The Vraxians were tall, insect-like creatures with multiple limbs and hard outer shells. This being looked much more human. As Jack watched, she raised her head, looking around desperately. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead. Then she spoke. Her words were picked up by the external microphone, barely audible above the storm. "Please," she said in perfect English, "save me." Jack stepped back from the monitor. It had to be a trick. The Vraxians were clever. They might have created some kind of bait to lure out survivors. He watched as she tried to stand, failed, and collapsed again. Her breathing was labored. If this was an act, it was a good one. "Don't do it," Jack told himself. "Don't be stupid." On the screen, he saw lights in the distance, the distinctive glow of Vraxian drones moving through the forest. They were on patrol, probably pushed off course by the storm. In minutes, they would reach the clearing where the strange woman lay. Jack knew what the drones did to humans they found. He had seen it once, through his periscope in the early days. He still had nightmares about it. "Damn it," he muttered. 3 minutes later, Jack stood at his emergency exit, a small tunnel that led up to a hatch hidden under a fallen tree. He wore his protective suit, designed to mask body heat. Rain poured in as he opened the hatch just enough to peer out. She was there, just as the camera showed, lying still in the mud. Closer now, he could see her skin had a faint purple tone. Her ears definitely came to slight points. She was alien, but nothing like the Vraxians. The drone lights were closer, maybe 2 minutes away. Jack made his decision. He crawled out, staying low, and reached the woman. Up close, she looked even more human-like. Her face was delicate, with high cheekbones and a small nose. Her eyes were closed. "Hey," he whispered, touching her shoulder. Her eyes snapped open. They were deep violet with no whites, entirely purple with a darker center. Definitely not human. "Help me," she whispered. "Please." The drone lights reflected off the trees now. No more time. Jack lifted her. She was surprisingly light. He carried her quickly to the hatch, lowered her in, then followed, pulling the cover closed just as the hum of drone engines filled the air. In the safety of the entrance tunnel, Jack looked at the alien woman. She was unconscious again, breathing shallowly. He had just broken every rule of survival he had set for himself. The smart move would be to put her back outside. Instead, he carried her deeper into his bunker, toward the uncertain future he had just chosen. Jack placed the alien woman on his cot. Up close in the bunker's light, her skin was definitely lavender-tinted. He checked her pulse. Her heart beat faster than a human's, but it seemed steady. Her breathing had improved once they got inside. He gathered his first aid supplies, unsure if human medicine would help an alien. The cut on her forehead wasn't deep, so he cleaned it carefully. She had other injuries too, bruises on her arms and a nasty gash on her leg. As he bandaged the leg wound, she stirred. Those violet eyes opened again, focusing slowly on Jack. She didn't scream or try to run. She just watched him. "You're safe," Jack said, surprised at how rough his voice sounded after months of rarely speaking. "For now, at least." "Thank you," she replied, her English perfect, but with an accent he couldn't place. "You risk your life for a stranger." Jack stepped back, keeping some distance between them. "Who are you? What are you?" She sat up slowly, wincing. "My name is Lyra. I am Narration." When Jack showed no recognition, she added, "My people were conquered by the Vraxians centuries ago, long before they found your world. You work for them." Jack's hand moved to the knife at his belt. Lyra noticed the movement. "I did. Not by choice." She pulled back her collar to reveal a metal device embedded in her neck. "All Narratians are implanted at birth. We serve as translators, scouts, and other things." Her expression darkened. "I escaped 3 days ago." "How do you speak our language?" "Vraxians upload language data directly to our brains through these." She tapped her temple where a small metallic disc was partially hidden by her silver-white hair. "They wanted me to understand humans, to help them find survivors." Jack paced the small room. "So they're still hunting us?" "Yes, but that's not the worst part." Lyra looked directly at him. "The Vraxians aren't just conquering Earth. They're remaking it. Changing the atmosphere, replacing plants, adjusting the temperature. In 2 years, this planet will be perfect for Vraxians but poisonous to humans." Jack felt cold. He had wondered about the alien plants spreading everywhere. "Why tell me this? Why escape now?" Lyra's hands trembled slightly. "Because what they're doing to Earth is what they did to my homeworld. My people now live on Vraxian space stations, completely dependent on them. Only a few Narratians remember we once had our own planet." Her voice grew stronger. "I won't let that happen to another species." Jack studied her. She seemed sincere, but he had survived this long by being cautious. "How do I know this isn't a trick?" "You don't," she said simply. "But if I wanted to harm you, the drones would already be here." She had a point. Jack offered her water, which she accepted gratefully. "Your bunker is impressive," she said, looking around. "Most humans we found had inadequate shelters. The Vraxians don't understand why some humans prepared for disaster while others didn't." "Most people thought I was crazy," Jack said, "building a bunker for the end of the world." "You weren't crazy. You were ready." Lyra's eyes moved to his equipment. "Is that a communication system?" Jack nodded. "I monitor Vraxian transmissions. Can't understand them, though." "I can," Lyra said. "With my implants, I can access their frequencies, maybe even their data networks." Jack stared at her. If she was telling the truth, she was incredibly valuable. If she was lying, she was incredibly dangerous. As if reading his thoughts, Lyra said, "I know you have no reason to trust me. But I've seen how the Vraxians operate. They're methodical, efficient, but not creative. Humans are different. You adapt, you improvise. My people lost that ability generations ago." She looked at him intently. Humans might actually have a chance against them. Jack didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pulled out a chair for her at his small table. "You should eat something," he said. "Then you can tell me everything you know about these Vraxians." "Everything." Lyra nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "Where would you like me to begin?" For 3 days, Lyra and Jack shared the small space of the bunker. At first, Jack kept his distance, watching her carefully. But as time passed, his suspicion slowly gave way to curiosity. Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed, the small metal disc on her temple glowing faintly. Jack watched as she listened to something he couldn't hear. "They're moving their patrols," she said, opening her violet eyes. "The Vraxians think the storm damaged some of their sensors. They don't know about us." Jack nodded. "Good. What else can you hear?" "There's a command center about 200 miles east of here. It controls all the drones in this region." Lyra traced a pattern on the floor with her finger. It's where they coordinate the terraforming process. Terraforming, changing Earth to suit them, Jack said, the words still bitter in his mouth. Yes, but that's not all. Lyra stood up, wincing slightly as she put weight on her injured leg. The command center has a quantum communications array. It's how they talk to their fleet in orbit and back to their home world. Jack handed her a cup of water. And why should I care about that? Because, Lyra took a sip, choosing her words carefully. Because there are still human resistance fighters out there. Small groups, hiding like you. If we could access that array, we could send a message to all of them at once. Jack laughed without humor. Right, just walk into an alien base and use their phone. It's possible, Lyra insisted. I know their security protocols. I was created to interface with their systems. Jack looked at her sharply. Created. Lyra touched the metal in her neck. Nellarans are modified. Each generation, the Vraxians change us to better serve them. I was designed to understand both Vraxian and human biology and technology. She hesitated. What did you do before the invasion? I was a military engineer, Jack replied. Specialized in communications and defense systems. Lyra's eyes widened. That's perfect. You understand how to adapt technology, to make it work in ways it wasn't designed for. Jack stood and walked to his workbench. He picked up a small device he had been tinkering with, a modified radio scanner. You really think we could get into their command center? Not easily, Lyra admitted. But the Vraxians don't expect resistance anymore. They think they've won. Jack was quiet for a long moment. For months, he had focused only on surviving. One day at a time. Now Lyra was talking about fighting back. Even if we could send a message, he said finally, what good would it do? The Vraxians have better weapons, better technology. They've already won. Lyra stepped closer to him. No species is unbeatable, Jack. The Vraxians have weaknesses. Their armored bodies can't handle certain sound frequencies. Their vision is poor in yellow light. And they rely completely on their technology. If it fails, they become confused, disorganized. How do you know all this? I watched. I listened. For years, I gathered information, waiting for a chance to use it. Lyra's voice grew intense. Humans aren't like my people. You don't give up. You fight, even when it seems hopeless. Jack turned away, moving to his periscope to check the outside world. The storm had passed. The alien landscape was eerily still. There are other survivors out there, Lyra said quietly. People like you who prepared, who adapted. Alone, none of you can fight the Vraxians, but together, with the right information. Jack remained silent, thinking. The idea was crazy. Suicidal, probably. But for the first time in 6 months, he felt something other than resignation. A tiny spark of purpose. We'd need supplies, he said finally. Better weapons than what I have here. Lyra smiled, her violet eyes brightening. Does that mean you'll help? Jack turned back to face her. It means I'll listen to your plan. If it makes sense, maybe we'll try. He gestured to his maps spread on the table. Show me exactly where this command center is. As Lyra bent over the maps, Jack found himself studying her face. He was still not sure if he could trust her. But he was sure of one thing. Staying in this bunker forever wasn't living. It was just waiting to die. And Jack Mercer wasn't ready to die just yet. Jack stepped outside his bunker for the first time in over 6 months. The air felt strange in his lungs, thinner somehow, with an odd sweet smell from the alien plants spreading across the land. Beside him, Lyra scanned the sky for drones. Clear for now, she said, but we should move quickly. They carried backpacks with essential supplies. Jack had his rifle slung over his shoulder, though Lyra warned him it would do little against Vraxian armor. Still, it felt good to have it. We need to reach the old highway by nightfall, Jack said, looking at his map, then follow it east for about 20 miles before cutting north through the forest. Lyra nodded. Her silver-white hair was now tied back, and she wore some of Jack's spare clothes, making her look almost human if you ignored the lavender skin and pointed ears. They moved through the changed landscape cautiously. Where once pine trees had dominated, now strange blue-purple vegetation grew. Some plants seemed to follow their movement, turning slightly as they passed. The plants are sensory tools, Lyra explained. They don't report to the Vraxians directly, but they change the soil chemistry based on what passes by. Vraxian scientists check them to track large animal movements. Will they detect us? Jack asked. Not immediately, but we should still avoid touching them when possible. By midday, they reached what had once been a small town. Buildings stood empty, some damaged by whatever weapons the aliens had used during the initial attack. No bodies remained. The Vraxians were efficient in their cleanup. Jack felt a chill seeing the abandoned streets. I used to buy supplies here sometimes. The people were friendly. Lyra touched his arm gently. I'm sorry. The Vraxians see other species as resources, not as people. They skirted around the town, using abandoned cars for cover. As they passed a small house on the outskirts, Jack froze. He heard something, a soft sound from inside. He signaled to Lyra to stay quiet and raised his rifle. Slowly, he approached the house's broken window and peered inside. A woman stood there, pointing a shotgun directly at his face. Back up slowly or I'll shoot, she said, her voice steady despite her thin frame. Jack raised his hands. I'm human, not here to hurt you. The woman's eyes narrowed, then widened as Lyra came into view. What the hell is that? She's with me, Jack said quickly. She's not a Vraxian. She's helping me. The standoff lasted several tense seconds before another voice called from deeper in the house. Samantha. Who is it? The woman, Samantha, kept her shotgun raised. Two people. One looks human. The other doesn't. An older man appeared behind her, holding a baseball bat. Behind him, Jack could see two more people, a young man and woman. We're trying to fight back against the Vraxians, Jack explained. There's a command center east of here. We're going to try to send a message to other survivors. Samantha laughed bitterly. You and your pet alien against an entire base. Good luck with that. Lyra stepped forward, ignoring the gun. I know how to get in. I know their weaknesses, but we need help. Something in Lyra's voice made Samantha lower her weapon slightly. Why should we trust you? Because sitting here waiting to be found isn't a plan, Lyra replied. The Vraxians are changing your world. In less than 2 years, humans won't be able to breathe the air. The older man put his hand on Samantha's shoulder. Let them in, Sam. At least let's hear what they have to say. Inside, they learned the group had been surviving by constantly moving, never staying in one place more than a few days. Samantha had been a park ranger before the invasion. She knew the land well enough to avoid patrols. We've seen other survivors, she told Jack as they shared their limited food. But most are just hiding, like we are. No one's fighting back. That changes now, Jack said, unfolding his map on the dusty table. If enough of us work together, we might have a chance. As night fell, Lyra went outside to listen to Vraxian communications through her implant. Samantha watched her go, then turned to Jack. Can you really trust her? She asked quietly. Jack looked toward the door where Lyra had disappeared. I don't know, he admitted. But right now, she's the only hope we've got. 5 days of careful travel brought them within sight of the Vraxian command center. Jack, Lyra, Samantha, and 2 others from the group, a former army medic named Greg, and a college student named Ella who had surprising skill with computers, lay on a ridge overlooking the facility. The command center rose from the cleared forest like an insect hive, a dome-shaped structure with smaller buildings connected by covered walkways. The entire complex glowed with a faint blue light. Vraxian drones patrolled the perimeter, and larger Vraxians moved between buildings. That's a lot of security, Samantha whispered, lowering the binoculars. Lyra nodded. The main entrance is heavily guarded, But there's a secondary access point here. She pointed to a smaller structure on the east side. It's for maintenance workers, mostly automated drones, but sometimes supervised by lower-ranking Vraxians. Jack studied the pattern of the patrols. Even if we get inside, how do we reach the communications array? The central dome, Lyra said. But we need to move carefully. The Vraxians have heat sensors everywhere. What about you? Greg asked. Won't they recognize you're not human? Lyra touched the implant on her neck. This identifies me as a Nilaran assistant. If I appear to be escorting captive humans, the guards might not question it immediately. No one looked convinced. Jack laid out the rifle he had been carrying. This won't help us in there. We need to rely on stealth and Lyra's knowledge. They waited until nightfall. The Vraxian facility grew brighter against the dark sky, its lights pulsing in a rhythm that made Jack's eyes hurt. Their shift change happens soon, Lyra said. The maintenance entrance will have minimal supervision for about 3 minutes. They moved down from the ridge, staying low in the alien underbrush. As they approached the perimeter, Lyra signaled for them to stop. She closed her eyes, concentrating on something only she could hear through her implant. The patrol just passed, she whispered. We have a window now. They rushed forward, reaching the maintenance entrance, a small door set into the outer wall. Lyra placed her hand on a panel beside it. The door slid open with a soft hiss. How did you do that? Ella asked. My implants, Lyra explained. The Vraxians designed Nilarans to interface with their technology. Inside, the air was warmer and had a strange spicy smell. The corridors were narrow with high ceilings, designed for the taller Vraxians. Lyra led them confidently, pausing at intersections to check for danger. They passed rooms filled with strange equipment. In one, Jack saw what looked like human belongings, clothes, books, toys, being studied by automated machines. They're trying to understand human culture, Lyra whispered. The Vraxians always study the species they conquer. In another room, they saw something that made them all stop. Transparent containers held what appeared to be humans, suspended in a yellowish fluid, with tubes and wires connected to their bodies. Are they alive? Samantha asked, her voice barely audible. Lyra's face showed sadness. In a way, the Vraxians experiment on captured specimens to better understand how to alter the planet. Jack felt sick, but forced himself to move on. We can't help them now. We need to reach the communications array. They continued deeper into the facility. Twice they had to hide as Vraxians passed by. Tall insect-like creatures with multiple limbs and gleaming exoskeletons. Up close, their clicking language sounded even more alien. Finally, they'd reached a sealed door marked with symbols that Jack couldn't read. This is it, Lyra said. The quantum communications chamber. She placed her hand on the control panel, but this time frowned. It's not accepting my access. They must have updated the security after I escaped. Jack looked at Ella. Can you hack it? Ella studied the panel. Maybe with Lyra's help, but it will take time. Time we don't have, Greg said, pointing down the corridor where a light was flashing. I think that's an alarm. Lyra's eyes widened. They know we're here. We have minutes at most. Jack made a quick decision. Ella, work with Lyra on the door. Samantha, Greg, and I will try to slow them down. As they took defensive positions in the corridor, Jack wondered if they had come all this way just to fail. But looking at his companions, human and alien alike, he knew they had already accomplished something important. For the first time since the invasion, humans were fighting back. The sound of Vraxian soldiers grew louder. Their many legs clicked against the floor as they approached. Jack, Samantha, and Greg took cover at a bend in the corridor, while Ella and Lyra worked frantically at the sealed door. Try bypassing the main circuit, Jack called to them. A group of Vraxians appeared at the far end of the hallway. Their insect-like bodies were covered in hard blue-black armor, and they carried weapons that looked like long metal tubes. Their multiple eyes glowed red in the dim light. Don't let them use those weapons, Lyra warned. The stun setting paralyzes humans instantly. Samantha fired her shotgun. The noise was deafening in the enclosed space. Evraxian stumbled but didn't fall. Greg threw a homemade smoke bomb, filling the corridor with thick gray smoke. The door's opening, Ella shouted. Jack backed toward the communications room, firing his pistol to keep the Vraxians at bay. The 5 of them slipped through the door, and Lyra quickly sealed it behind them. The communications chamber was vast and circular. In the center stood a glowing pillar of light that shifted between colors. Around it were control panels with symbols Jack didn't recognize. That's the quantum transmitter, Lyra said, moving quickly to a panel. It can send messages faster than light, to anywhere the Vraxians have a receiver. Ella joined her at the controls. What's the plan? We need to broadcast on all frequencies, Lyra explained, her fingers moving across the alien interface. If I can access the right protocols, we can send a message to every resistance cell on Earth at once. Suddenly, a new voice spoke. An ambitious plan, Lyra 237, but ultimately futile. They all turned to see a Vraxian standing on a platform above them. This one was larger than the others, with a deep purple sheen to its exoskeleton. Golden symbols were etched into its armor. Commander Zex, Lyra said, her voice tight. The large Vraxian made a sound like grinding metal. A laugh, perhaps. Did you really think we wouldn't track you? Your implant has been sending us your location since you left. Jack looked at Lyra in horror. You led them to my bunker. To all of us. No. Lyra stepped back, her hand going to her neck implant. That's impossible. I disabled the tracker. You disabled what we wanted you to disable, Commander Zex replied. The true tracker is in your neural implant, the one you use to access our systems. The commander turned his attention to the humans. You should thank Lyra 237. Thanks to her, we've located the last major human resistance cells across your planet. They're being eliminated as we speak. Jack felt cold with shock and betrayal. All this time, Lyra had been a tool of the Vraxians. Everything, her escape, her story, her help, had been part of their plan. Samantha raised her shotgun toward Lyra. You lie to us. No. Lyra stepped forward, facing Commander Zex. You're the liar. You've always used my people, treated us like tools. But I'm not your tool anymore. In a swift motion, Lyra leaped toward the commander, catching him by surprise. She pressed her hand against the symbol on his chest plate. Your authorization is all I needed, she said. The commander tried to throw her off, but Lyra held on, her small body somehow clinging to his massive form. The implant on her temple glowed brightly, pulsing with energy. What are you doing? The commander demanded, his voice now showing fear. Something you never expected, Lyra replied. My people may be slaves, but we've learned your systems better than you know them yourselves. I wasn't leading these humans to you. I was leading you to me. The quantum transmitter in the center of the room pulsed with new intensity. Symbols flashed across all the screens too fast to follow. She's uploading something to the system, Ella said, watching the displays. The commander finally threw Lyra to the ground. Stop her. She's infected the network. But it was too late. The transmitter flashed once, blindingly bright, then settled into a steady glow. Lyra looked up at Jack, blood trickling from her mouth. I wasn't betraying you, she said softly. I needed his direct access to plant the virus. It will spread through their entire network, disrupting communications, disabling weapons, revealing their positions to all human fighters. Jack knelt beside her, his anger giving way to confusion. You planned this all along. Lyra nodded weakly. Sometimes the only way to defeat a powerful enemy is from within. Around them, alarms began to sound as the Vraxian systems started to fail. Chaos erupted throughout the Vraxian command center. Lights flickered, doors opened and closed at random, and the alarm systems wailed with changing pitches. The virus Lyra had uploaded was spreading quickly. Commander Zex roared in anger, his multiple limbs striking at control panels. "What have you done, Nelloran slave?" Lyra struggled to stand. Jack helped her up, supporting her weight. "I've given the humans a chance," she answered. "The virus will spread to every Vraxian system on Earth and in orbit. Your drones will stop working. Your weapons will misfire. Your communications will broadcast your positions to human fighters." The commander lunged toward them, but Greg and Samantha opened fire. The bullets didn't penetrate his thick armor, but they slowed him down. "We need to get out of here," Jack shouted above the noise. Ella pointed to a side door. "That way." The facility map showed emergency exits in every section. They ran, half-carrying Lyra, who was growing weaker. Behind them, Commander Zex called for reinforcements, but his orders seemed to go unanswered as the communication systems continued to fail. The group fought their way through the confused Vraxian facility. Some aliens ran in panic while others tried to maintain order. The humans used the chaos to their advantage, slipping through normally secured areas and avoiding direct confrontation when possible. Finally, they reached an exit that led them outside the facility. The night air was cool on their faces as they ran toward the cover of the strange alien forest. "Look," Samantha pointed to the sky. Above them, the Vraxian ships in low orbit were moving erratically. Some had lights flickering on and off. Others seemed to be drifting without control. "The virus reached their fleet," Lyra said, her voice weak but triumphant. "Just as I planned." They traveled through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the command center. When dawn came, they found shelter in an abandoned human building. Only then did they have time to tend to Lyra's injuries and talk about what had happened. "How long will the virus affect their systems?" Jack asked. Lyra rested against a wall, her purple skin paler than before. "Days, maybe weeks. Long enough for humans across the planet to strike back. The Vraxians never expected resistance from within. They thought they had complete control over my people." "Will more ships come from their home world?" Greg asked. "Eventually," Lyra admitted, "but it will take time. Their nearest fleet is months away. By then, humans can prepare." Over the next few days, they received reports through Lyra's implant, which she had reconfigured to only receive transmissions, not send them. All across Earth, human resistance fighters were attacking vulnerable Vraxian positions. With their technology failing, the invaders were suddenly on the defensive. 1 week after their escape from the command center, they returned to Jack's bunker. It was undamaged. The Vraxians had never found it. Jack converted it into a planning center for local resistance operations. Fighters came and went, sharing information and supplies. The alien plants that had been spreading across Earth began to wither without the regular chemical treatments from Vraxian ships. The sky slowly returned to its natural blue as the atmospheric changes halted. One evening, Jack found Lyra standing outside the bunker, looking up at the stars. The air was clearer now, and the familiar constellations were visible again. "What will you do when this is over?" Jack asked, standing beside her. "If humans win." Lyra smiled slightly. "Help free my people, perhaps. The Nillarans have forgotten how to fight for themselves. We could learn from humans." Jack looked at the night sky, thinking of the Vraxian reinforcements that would someday come. "We'll need all the allies we can get." "You'll have them," Lyra promised. "Other species enslaved by the Vraxians will join you when they see it's possible to fight back." Around them, the Earth was healing, returning to its